Hello there, fellow maker. Welcome to the shop. You got Bill today, and I have a very exciting project, something I've been wanting to do since I first saw it when we watched Arcane, the League of Legends show. Jinx releases a bunch of these cool mechanical butterflies for nefarious purposes. The butterflies look like they're made out of brass or clockwork, and I want one. Not only do I want one, but I want to make it out of brass, so I've been doing some shopping. I did some figuring out based on screenshots from the show, trying to scale it and also trying to figure out what size and shape brass I need to buy. So the wings, obviously big flat pieces. I have this 1.5 millimeter thick brass. I have a few sheets, some extra in case I goof it up. Hopefully we can CNC some wings out of there. I also have this bar of brass here, and that'll be the body and head. And then for the legs, this was really exciting. It has these thin, spindly legs here. So I got these telescoping brass rods. This is KNS stuff, just ordered from Amazon. These all nest into one another, so I can have a thin upper leg, a thinner mid leg, and an even thinner little toe for our butterfly. And those are all going to get soldered together once we're at the assembly phase. For my design, I did a drawing with a pencil and pen to figure everything out. Like I said, the references aren't super clear, so I did kind of have to figure out some things myself. So I did a whole bunch of drawing, kind of figured out the scale here, figured out some of the details, and then I took that and I redrew it in Inkscape. So I have a really clean vector image of my design. This will work really well in Fusion. I can even drop this into Fusion to make my 3D files for most of these parts, especially these really intricate wings. So yeah, next step is Fusion 360, so we can make some 3D models and use a CNC machine to cut those models out of brass. Here is a quick look at my 3D model. It's not all the parts are modeled because I'm not going to CNC all the parts. The main parts will be the wings, which I've made the front and back, and then I'll mirror them to do the other side. The body and the head are going to be CNC'd out of that brass we saw earlier. The holes will be for the legs and the wing wires that'll hold the wings up. On the back there are these two rings. Those will actually be done on the lathe manually. And then there's this tail diffuser. That's going to be what glows, hopefully. I'm thinking an LED will go in the back here and point into this diffuser, and that will be 3D printed, I think, on the resin printer. We may have to mold it and cast it to make it translucent enough, but that's the plan right now anyway. So some of these parts will be CNC'd, some of them will be done on the manual lathe, and some of the parts will be done by hand. A very multi-discipline project. We're over at the CNC computer here with my model all loaded up. I did a little 3D modeling here, and I've only made the parts that we're going to make on the CNC machine. The wings and whatnot. We're going to start with something small, a little easy part, I hope. Shouldn't say that out loud, but I think it's going to be pretty easy to do just the head. Let's hide the wings and the tail and the body. So yeah, just this little part here. I'm going to cut that out of a piece of brass, and I've made a little setup here with a couple operations. It's going to bore out a thing, it's going to clear out some material, and then it's going to cut out our whole piece. So let's head over to the Shapeoko, start making chips. All right, so I'm going to take this off. This is such a small piece, I'm not too worried about it. Oh boy, a little aggressive, but I think we're okay. Okay, first piece cut out. There it is. Didn't quite poke through the bottom, not a big deal. There are a couple of tabs in there holding it down too. So we'll cut this out by hand and clean it up. Step one, I gotta get it out of there. Wow, that layer is so thin I can cut it with an X-Acto blade. There's just like an onion skin left over. Okay, we'll have to do a lot of post cleanup sanding and all that. But that is a great start. Looking a little cleaned up now. We'll do a lot more of that work later. I just wanted to see how it was doing. Up next, I want to make the eyes, and we're going to do those on the lathe. For the eyes, I actually have this piece of brass that I used. I was making this little brass hammer, and I goofed up this one here, but I kept it. Wouldn't you know, I bet I could get a couple of good butterfly eyes out of that. Okay. Down to size, perfect. This is a little long. I'm gonna use this to grab it in the jaws when I turn it around. Do the other features. I could use the parting tool for this, but it terrifies me. So we're going old school with a hacksaw. Ooh, warm. Ah, there we go. This is gonna go in like that, but I want a little bit of a gap so I can machine this whole surface. About good there. I use this marking tool to make a line where I want to make my next cut. Well, that's aggressive. One eyeball, almost done, and that'll go right in there. So I'm just doing the little slot across his eye here. Got my piece in a vise so I can hold it. I have my rotary tool to get it started, but I also have this little needle file that only has files on the very edges here, not on these faces, and that should help me clean up that groove, I hope. I have a couple of files too, actually. This one has grooves on all sides to do a little bit of shaping here. I am quite pleased. Ikoliks Spring can eat his heart out. Little cleanup here. Nice and easy with the Scotch-Brite pad. Well, that looks terrific. Look at this. Goes right in there, and I can alter his mood. He can be angry, happy. Here is the start of our head. And of course, I made a second eyeball that goes in the other side. And we have the start of our little bug. It's looking terrific. I think next up, we'll CNC out the body right there. Success! And it only took me 2 tries. I goofed up a little bit right there, but that's okay. That's why I bought lots of brass. So here's our part. We'll have to remove it from there. You can see I didn't drill these holes all the way through. I just sort of spot drilled them. We'll do that with the drill press later because I did some tests. I was trying to drill holes of different sizes with the CNC machine, and these 2 holes are full of broken bits. So drilling really tiny holes with the end mill there didn't work great, but we'll just do that on the drill press. But that looks pretty great. Removing my parts. There we go. We can go drill those holes. There are the holes for the legs down here and the wings over here. I may have to widen these a little bit later, but we are well on our way. Well, the next step is wings. And I've been at this for a while, like weeks, off and on a little bit. You know how our buddy Adam Savage says that failure is always an option? This is what he was talking about. Let me guide you through my many failures. This is what I was trying to do. And I got some successes, and I still have another wing to cut out. I'll show that to you when we do it. But turns out that doing 2-sided machining, there's features on both sides, 2-sided machining on a very thin piece of metal, there were failure modes I didn't know existed until I did them. This is a very hard thing to do, hence all of the issues. The first thing that happened was I ended up cutting one out that I kind of liked. This one here worked pretty okay. And I realized it's just way too thick. This is supposed to be a delicate butterfly, and this is about 1.5 millimeters. I know, right? Huge. Too thick. So I abandoned that, and I bought some new metal. I also made a couple of other mistakes over here that we're not going to talk about. So I got this 0.8 millimeter stuff that's perfect. It's the right thickness. I love it. But there's so little meat there, it's easy to accidentally machine right through it when you do one side and then the other. And I repeated that error many times. I also had some troubles aligning things. You can see I cut off too much on this side here. These failures did provide me an opportunity to do some tests. For example, this is a soldering test with the silver solder. And I wasn't worried about goofing this up because it was already goofed up. And it went great. So I'm really optimistic about that for the rest of our work. These littler ones, I was able to get 2 good successes, 2 good machined parts on both sides. They will, of course, require some handwork to clean up perfectly, but those 2 are good. These bigger ones had even more failure modes that I discovered along the way. This one was just a slip up. I goofed up the geometry in my 3D model and it machined it in a weird way. It almost worked. It was almost perfect, but not good enough. And then these 2 here, the same thing happened, and it took me both tries to figure out what was going on. So I machined the features on one side and then flipped it over and did the other side. And in the middle, it got so thin, it's almost foil there. It got so thin that it buckled, and that buckling was enough for it to just chew right through the remaining meat there. So, like I said, it took me 2 tries to figure out what was going on there, and I realized I wasn't able to make this consistent enough to do the work that way. So I figured out that for these interior details on both sides, I could just use acid etching. So this was the test I did, acid etching it, and it turned out great. So that's going to be how we move forward with this and how we make the other wing. We'll machine the outside on the Shapeoko, we'll machine these holes, and then the details will be done with acid. Like I said, these failures are not only an option, but they're necessary. Every single one of these lessons are now permanently embedded in my mind. I'm not going to forget them again because they cost me brass and time to learn. And now I know exactly what I need to do to go forward. It only cost me about $20 in brass and a couple weeks of work. But now I'm armed. Let's head to the CNC machine and cut out some big old wings. So another thing I learned is when I swapped to this thinner brass, my hold downs here were no longer grippy enough. I had to modify them. So many lessons I will never forget. The members of our Extra Credit Club have been following along these sweet adventures. Every week we put out a vlog behind the scenes talking about what we've been up to. And they recommended double-sided tape to hold down these pieces, which would work. I just really don't like how the tape gums up the cutter. It's a 1/16 inch cutter. It gets really gummed up by that and has a chance to break, and I've already broken a lot of bits. But that is a good way to do it. You could totally do it that way. I'm trying to get better at my work holding though. All right, we can zero our tool and get to cutting. Here's our wing ready to go. We are going to do 2 operations. The first one will be an adaptive clearing that'll cut out all the holes. And then the second one will be a contour that cuts out the perimeter. That's all we need. The rest of the details will be done with acid. This should be pretty quick. I'm setting the Z height to the top of my material, and it turns out this is really critical for doing thin work like this. Hence the piece of foil. This is the thinnest thing I could find. And as soon as it catches just like that, we set our Z height to that, and it will not bury itself in the material, which I've done a couple times. This cutting went great. I've had a lot of practice doing this part, and it went awesome. It's still in there because there's these tabs to hold the material down, and we can remove those. There we go. Obviously, it will require some cleanup, but now we can do the acid etching! I'm back at the CNC machine, and I've got my vinyl cutting software set up to cut out my stencils for the acid etching, and I've modified it a bit to just include the details that I want to etch here. And we're going to send this over to the machine and it'll cut it out for us. Good job, machine. I went with blue for my stencil because it's my favorite color and I have a lot of it. The color doesn't matter. With our vinyl cut here, we can weed out the negative space. We want to keep everything that's going to cover the spots we don't want to get etched, but we want to remove everything else carefully because there are some little pieces in here. Whoop, whoop, there we go. Yeah, some good squiggle do there. We're going to put some transfer tape down so we can move these over to our piece. And then I have a brayer. I can just smush that down. And this makes our stencils. I can even just cut them out individually and do them one at a time. Next step, I have a little alcohol here to clean off the brass. We want to make sure that there isn't any smudges or dirt or finger goo. Let that evaporate, and now we can transfer our stencil. There we go. And just line it up with the edge, I guess. It looks pretty good. Get on there. Now we're talking. The other side goes on. All those Lego sticker applications are paying off. I don't want to brag, but I'm like wicked good at putting stickers on things. Except for this, except for that's not supposed to be there. Some good adhesive. There. The edge of the brass is exposed here and we don't want that to get eaten up. So we're just going to draw on it with a Sharpie. Sharpie is enough of a resist to prevent the acid from getting at the metal. So you could even just draw this on the brass with Sharpie instead of using a stencil and it would totally work. I've seen a lot of really cool acid etching work done just by hand with a marker. I'm all set up here. I've got a little rig for my acid etching, and for the acid, we're going to be using ferric chloride, which is great for etching any kind of metal that is ferrous, including brass. It will definitely etch the brass. We're going to fill up this little container here with ferric chloride, and I put a little motor on it with a weight so that it'll vibrate and move the acid around in there. It should help. Nice. I can change the speed with my little power supply here. Yeah, and that should help with the etching. Time for the good stuff. This is great. This is reusable. I've had this stuff for years. We'll just cover it up. And I'm going to let that sit for like half an hour. I've done some other etching tests and that seems like a good amount of time. Okay, do your thing. Oh, I think we could turn it up a little bit. So when I change the speed, we get different patterns on the surface. That's pretty awesome.
Science!
Also probably a little aggressive. All right, let's let it do its thing. Okay, that should do it. We did it for half an hour, checked it, and did it for another half an hour. So I'm feeling pretty good about this. Yeah. Cool. Go rinse this off in the sink. Clean off all our stuff. Looks good. Peeling away masking is fun all the time. I think we got a really good deep etch here too. This looks nice. There we go. Yeah, that looks awesome. So about an hour, I flipped it over halfway through. I don't know how much of a difference that made, but it looks really, really good.
Ooh.
We'll obviously do a lot of sanding and finishing work on all this, but like that is a good deep etch. That's awesome. I'll just be spending the next half hour peeling all these little pieces off. Come here, you. One piece, one piece, one piece. One piece! Except for that one. I was really hoping I could claw the crap out of this thing. It's all gonna get sanded. There we go. That is a really attractive looking wing there.
I love it.
Obviously these brass parts are gonna need some finishing work, but before I do that, I have a couple more parts to make, largely the butt. Our butterfly butt is gonna be made of a 3D printed part, which I've already done right here. Mocked this up in Fusion 360 and 3D printed it on one of our Anycubic resin printers. And this is going to get lit up by an LED. That's the plan anyway. The LED will shine that way and light up this whole thing. So it should act as a nice diffuser and light it up. Only, yeah, only green. We use a green LED and that should look really good. To install it on our little buddy here, we're gonna make this part out of some brass. Got a brass rod right there for that. And then this slightly larger one, I'm gonna need a slightly larger rod. So we'll head over to the lathe and start working on those. And I've already drawn up my schematics. So this way I know all the dimensions I need to follow. This is basically a list of instructions. Something exciting here, I'm going to be doing an angled cut. I've never done that on my lathe. Let's get to it. Let's go make mistakes. The moment of truth. It fits perfectly. Oh, it's so good. This is all I want to do. I just want to make very small things out of brass. This should fit right in there, and it does. There's some extra material in there. That'll all get cleaned up. We'll like Dremel that down once it's secured in there. That goes in there, and that goes in there, and that's how that goes. Lines up with the drawing. Where's his head? That looks so flippin' cool. Our tiny butt piece here has 4 little decoration pieces that go on it, and I cut out some of those on the CNC machine. Look how tiny they are. I cut out 5 because I'm sure I'm going to lose one of them. Now they're going to get attached like that. But what I want to do is file a little groove for each one of them so they can nest in there for the soldering that should hopefully keep it from moving. So we'll use our blue Sharpie, like a blue Dicom, to etch the lines where we want to do our filing. All right. So I'm using the center lines from my circle guide here to mark these. And this gets it roughly in quadrants. If I had a vertical milling machine and a dividing head, that would be like the coolest way to do this, the best way to do it. But I don't have any of those things. We're doing it by hand, and we are working in bandsaw tolerances. A little bit like that. Kind of worked. All right, it is filing time. First I'm filing a flat spot. That's the width I need, and then we'll try and carve it down to the depth we want. That is what we're going for. That little thing can hang out in there. We want to like clamp that a little bit when we do the soldering so it stays in place. It's time to try our hand at some silver soldering. I'm just getting my flux all mixed up, my crusty flux. And I've got my silver solder here ready to go. I'm going to crush this into tiny little bits. I'm going to cut off little bits because we need very, very tiny little specks to work with this very small object. Clean my parts off with some alcohol, so we should be good to go. Just put a little flux on the area we want to solder. Our little part gets set on there, and then to keep it from moving, I've made a clamp out of some stiff wire. It should just clamp it in there. And we can line it up, and it shouldn't move during the soldering. And then we're going to put tiny, teeny little bits of, oh, I dropped it. Teeny little bits of silver solder we're going to put in the right area. All right, do the other side, and then we'll torch it. Got a MAP gas torch here, and I'm going to heat this up until it all melts. It did it! I mean, of course it did it. I'm so good at this. Well, that went great. I did some tests before, and ow, this part is still very hot. Did some tests before, and it didn't go quite this smoothly, but the practice I did on like this piece right here, did some practicing, has paid off. And now we can do the other 3. Another tiny chunk. And a cat hair, look at that. Get out of here. Boy, it just goes, huh? When it's ready to go, it just goes. Here's our little piece all put together. Not perfect, but I am very pleased with how it turned out. This corrosion on here, this stuff, you could put this in a pickle solution of some kind. I've never done that before, but that's an option. I'm just gonna come in with some files and sandpaper and do some cleanup work, maybe clean up these fillets a little bit. But again, overall, I am very pleased with this. Just a tiny bit of elbow grease and we're back to looking really, really good. This little guy here is a little proud on the inside. I want to remove all that. I also have to make room for some wires where the LEDs are going to go. And then I can scribe this with a pointy thing. There we go, and that's what needs to get removed. Goes in there, and now it all lines up. Very nice. I made another notch and a little hole in there for the wires. And the plan is for those wires to come in through the legs, and then, whoops, then the LED will be right there to hook up to them. That's the plan. I bet it'll work, but right now it's all a theory. First we flux, and then we put our thing on. Yeah. That is cooling off, but it looks great. Next, I'm going to start thinking about cleaning up these parts. They still have their marks from the CNC machine on there, and I want to get rid of those completely. Could go in and sand all that, but I'd have to sand all this really smooth as well, this texture from the acid etching. So instead, I want to go in with a small grinding bit on my rotor tool and add an intentional texture to all these recessed areas. It'll take a while, but I think it'll look really nice, and it'll be easier than trying to go in there with sandpaper and clean all that up. Well, I don't know if this was any faster than just trying to sand that, but I do really love the way it turned out. That texture adds something very nice to this piece. It did take quite a while though. Now, time to start attaching all of these pieces. I did this test piece a while ago to figure all of this stuff out. I have some tubes and some rods I'm going to connect. I think I'll start by prepping the tubes. One side of the tube needs a slot cut in it. This is a little sloppy. I'm going to redo it. But the idea is that it will go around the part of the wing and then get soldered there. To make this cut, I've made this jig. It holds my tube in place there, and then I can hold my rotary tool in the right spot and cut a groove in it. So let's cut off this gross end and try that again. This is my little miter box, and I'm setting this binder clip to be a stop so that when I bring in my cut piece of brass there, I can get repeated cuts and cut off a bunch of little fellas like that. There we go. Just need to cut out a bunch more of those little fellas there. Time to solder. I've got the spots marked from my drawing where these are going to go, and I can stick them on with some of this flux. Carefully put little chunks of silver solder in there. There we go. And the flux helps it stick, helps it stay put. First wing went pretty well. I've switched to a brick, which should pull away less heat than the piece of metal I had. So easy. It was not that easy. Next is the stem of the wing, and I've got two little tubes that I've cut to length, and those are going to match up with the ones I already have on there. Now I can hopefully line all these pieces up, and they'll stick together with all that flux. Using some weights here to keep everything from moving on me. I'm super happy with how this turned out. Everything is connected the way I want it to be. And I thought I would sand away all of the oxidation, really do this cleanup by hand, and I did that on this one off camera, and then I decided that it was too much work. So I've ordered the chemicals and equipment I need to do a pickling solution for this to remove the oxidation. That'll be here in a few days, but until then, we have some more parts to make. Let's focus on these spindly little butterfly legs. I cut out all my leg segments here from all of these telescoping brass tubes. The idea is they fit right inside of one another perfectly. So the medium one can go into the large one, and then the little one goes in the medium one. And we'll solder all these together, and it should make a nice little toe or leg that gets smaller as it goes down. And then the smaller tubes go the full length, so I can bend these without them getting crimped. I also use the Dremel tool to cut a little notch in the sort of knee pit there. That's where the solder's going to go, and it's going to bend in that direction. It felt like having a little relief there made sense. This is small enough that my little torch should do the trick. I'm super pleased with how my little legs turned out. We'll get to bending them later after we do a little bit of cleanup on these. But next we have to pay attention to the head. I'm about to solder some parts onto the head here, but he needs holes for his antenna. And they go out of his forehead here at kind of a weird angle. So I'm going to try and use this little rotary bit to grind away a spot so that I can drill down into his noggin. Let's see how this goes. Now we drill carefully. So that should fit in there. Oh yeah.
Nice.
That'll be his little antenna. Now we can solder on the eyes. My thought is put my goop on and then put a couple chunks of solder in here. And then I'll just put the eye on top of it, and when it melts, it should all squish down. Should, I hope. Just want to make sure his eyes are slanted forward a little bit like that. I like that. Look at that. Just like I said it would work.
That's awesome.
I'm a wizard. To attach the body to the head, got a hole here, and this little peg here will make sure they all stay lined up. like so. And then we'll do a similar thing where we put some solder in here and then it's gonna go on like that. I could try and clamp it. Actually, I think that'll probably help. Yeah, it did it. It did it!
Nice.
Ah. To do all the cleanup on this, I decided to invest and get a pickling solution. This is the chemical that gets mixed in with water. I have a adorable little crock pot here that's warming up our solution. That's a mild acid. And what that's going to do for us is all of this oxidation, all this cruddy stuff from the soldering process, it gets rid of all of it like magic. So for example, here's what it looked like before, and I did a test. Here's what it looks like afterwards. It just removes all that gunk and it looks amazing. So we're going to use that to clean up our brass parts. We do still have some soldering to do, but we'll do some cleanup and then some soldering and then some more cleanup. Into the hot tub, little buddy. Only needs to chill for like 10 minutes. There you go. I've got some copper tongs here that won't react with the acid. There is a mild acid in here, hence the gloves. It's nothing too terrifying, but you do want to be careful. So we'll just let that soak. I'll throw these big old wings in there as well. They have plenty of corrosion on them. We'll get rid of those. And you go there too. And it does literally take just 10 minutes. It's super fast. Yeah, science. It's been about 10 minutes. Let's see if our soup is done. Ooh, yeah.
Oh, it's so bright.
There's our good looking wings. Nice and clean. Let's see where'd the body go. Yeah. Now obviously this is covered with a mild acid, so we do want to rinse all our parts off before we do any more work. And now just a little bit more cleanup. There is still some staining on there, but a wire brush makes quick work of that. I still want to do like some sanding and finishing. I want to break all the edges so there aren't any hard edges or anything. There's also some spots where the silver solder has spilled a bit. I'm not terribly accurate with it, so I may try and sand some of that off. But I'm really glad I bought and waited for that pickling solution to show up because it makes this part so easy. And it looks really good. To get rid of some of this coppery finish on here, I was using this wire brush. That worked okay. But these are little, basically it's a Scotch-Brite pad as a rotary tool bit. I have different grits. This green one is like 180. This red one's like 320. So I'm going to use that to try and buff and clean up the surfaces a little bit here. Oh yeah. I really like that finish too. Now I really do feel like click spring. After a bit of finishing work, I am very happy with how these parts are looking. I don't think I want to polish them to a shine. I really like this sort of matte finish. So we'll keep them like that. Next is time to start attaching more parts. I'm going to do the legs here, and I have them ready to go. I do think I want to bend this little shoulder here a bit before I install it. I'll use this scrap here to do that. I have a line, so I know how far down to go. And then just put a little bit of a bend in there. Figure it'd be easier to do this when it's not in the body than when it is. And then we can come in and tweak all the other elbows and everything when once it's all installed. I'm going to try out a different solder for this. This has a lot less silver in it, so it's cheaper, but it also melts at a lower temperature. Hopefully it'll be easier. I really just wanted to try all the options. This comes with its own little thing of flux. Just put the tiniest bit in there. And I can put the leg in. And then we're going to use this soldering iron instead of a torch. It should be nice and gentle and easy. A tiny amount of solder on the tip there, and then touch it down. I think I need more solder than that. Hopefully once it gets hot enough, it'll all flow right in there. I think I found with this soldering is that the the chunk of metal you're soldering has to get really hot and it will pull heat away from the join. So by pulling the heat away, it prevents it from getting hot enough to fully melt. There we go. Oh, preheating it with the torch, I think, is the way to go, because that flowed right in there. Nice. Starting to get the hang of this. That's how I apply it, and then torch it. That was way too much, but I should be able to remove. Since this solder is much softer than the silver, the more silvery solder, I can actually just carve away at it with an X-Acto knife to remove the excess here. I was a little excited. Time to do a little posing. The rear legs will be the last thing we do, or one of the last things we do anyway. I want to put the wings on, and I figure I can get these front legs situated, and then it can sit on its legs while we do the wings. I really love these little joints here with the telescoping tubes. I can use my guide here to get my wings in order. And that's going to bend right there. Kind of like that. I will cut this short. Just checking to see how this fits in there.
That looks cool.
That looks really cool. Just have to cut that short there. Kind of parallel with the butt, and then the other one goes a little bit up like that. Okay, I think I can just solder it like this. Nice, nice. Time for one more round of pickling. At least the bottom half should fit in there. There we go. All the spots that we just soldered are all covered now. We should get them nice and cleaned up. Just rinsing all the acid off and marveling at how it looks. My joins are a little sloppy, but this is my first time doing silver soldering, so I'm not going to beat myself up too much. I think it looks great. I want to just pose the antennas a little bit. They look like they curve down. This is all very posable at this point, which I think is pretty cool. This brass has been heated so much, it's nice and annealed, so it's really bendy. They're little cute little antennas.
So cute.
Everything's coming together. We have some more pieces to attach, but I want to change our attention to the base this is going to sit on. It'll have batteries in it to power our LED, and I'm going to make the parts in the CNC machine. The main part of the base is made out of a nice piece of hardwood that I had laying around, and I cut it out in the CNC machine using a big old 1/4-inch bit, which made fast work of the wood. And then the little inserts that'll go in there, those were also cut out on the CNC machine from some 1mm brass. I did a little hand sanding and work to get this looking a little more pretty, but these pieces right here, this is the best part. They fit in perfectly. So we're going to attach the battery to the back here. A little bit of an oopsie right there, but we're not going to see that. I'll attach the batteries to the back of these here. Let's figure this out here. This is going to go through like that. We have our wire sticking out, and that's going to get connected right there. Got the pad tinned. We got the wire tinned. We should just be able to stick everything together now. Appears to be attached. All right. Everything's good here, so we can glue it down for forever with a little super glue. That goes nice and snug as well. Okay, everything else gets locked down with hot glue. That was a lot of hot glue. And then we can throw some batteries in here and test it. Okay, a little wider. Other way. Uh-oh. All right, I figured it out. This battery holder, the spring, was all compressed. So if I stretch it out a little bit, it'll now make better contact up there. and our LED works.
Yeah.
So these are will be the back legs and they'll come in. Awesome. Well, we can put a little little wax on this and finish it right up. We're gonna finish this with some raw linseed oil and beeswax. This is from my friend Lynn over at Darbin Orvar. It is also the only wood finish I own. But it makes everything look so good. I'll have to wipe the wax off of these pads here so that they make electrical contact, but that's not a big deal. What is a big deal is how good this wood looks. Yeah, get in there. It's good stuff. Oh yeah, how good does that look? This part of the project took me very little time. Something about that dark wood with brass that just makes me happy. Moving back over to the butterfly, we have the two rear legs, and I have this really thin 28 gauge wire that's going to connect them to the LED, and I have to solder them right in there. This wire is so thin it doesn't even have a like a plastic coating on it. It just has like this lacquer coating, the red. So I'm scratching some of that off on the end so it'll solder correctly. I'm going to try and get a little solder in the end of that hole there. And we'll try and get that wire down in there. Okay, I think we've done it. Very good. Cool. Next bit of assembly. The butt is coming together. The LED here, it's a little green LED, and I've sanded the end of it flat so that it fits better. That's going to get glued in there. And this will get glued on like that. And I can just make sure that they're all lined up. And I think a quick setting epoxy will be best for that. I shouldn't need a ton of glue for this. I don't want any squeeze out. I want it to be very pretty. Looking good. And that should go in just like this. Oh, a tight fit too. The glue is cured. Almost time to install, but I want to shorten these before I install it because I think it's going to be difficult to reach. I've marked that so I know which side goes where. Whoa. Pew! All right. Yeah, now we wait. The glue is cured and the butt is secure. Next step, the legs need to go in the leg holes, but they need to be insulated from the brass around them. There's a little bit of a gap, tiny gap. I'm going to make that out of this piece of plastic that I found in the shop. I think it's UHMW. It should work just fine. So let's go to the lathe and make this a lot smaller. Oh, that's super snug. So floppy. It's hard to make this consistently thick along the hole. I think I have it close enough. I think this end's actually thinner and it should fit. Just gonna carve a hole for the wires to poke through. Oh boy, almost went all the way through it. Might be just a little too snug on the outside. The new plan, I can't press this whole thing in, so instead I'm going to cut it into two smaller tubes. There we go. Nice pressure fit. I can trim it flush. I use these pliers here to bend my legs into shape a little bit before installing them. And now I need to get this red cover coating off of these wires. I have a new plan. I want to put these plastic sleeves on the leg first and then try and press them in. There, that's my really snug. This is the way it's gonna work. I can feel it. Yeah, that's really snug. Oh yeah. And our little wire is in the right spot. Nice. Okay, now we have a tiny little thing to solder. Just soldering the leads from the legs to the LED in there. Think I got it? Quick test, make sure our lights still work. Yeah! Just like I planned it. Last thing we need to do is get this guy's legs positioned. Not the last thing we need to do, but let's do that next. And these back ones are kind of positionable because they're just friction fit in there.
Looks great.
There it is. The back legs can move, so you have to kind of set it up a little bit, but Time for a few more finishing touches on our butterfly. Since this butterfly was modified by Jinx, it has a delightful paint scheme on the back of the wings. So we're going to do that next. I'm using some of these Plaid FX paints that they sent us because they are almost the perfect color and they cover quite well. And I've mixed up a few paints ahead of time and did some paint tests. I have all of these spare wings that I cut out that didn't turn out great. So I took the opportunity to do a couple of paint tests and figure some things out. For example, the green doesn't cover pencil lines very well. So I'm not going to sketch my design first. I'm just going to freehand it. But I know that now because I did a paint test, and I recommend you do the same when you have the opportunity. Really, the only one I had to mix was this pinkish purple. I think I have a pretty good color going on there. This whole thing is meant to look, I think, like Jinx hand painted it, which is great because that's how I'm going to do it. I have my reference here. I'm going to save the black for last because the black can cover stuff and the green doesn't cover very well. So I'm going to start with the green. And even though there's black in the middle of this eye, I'm going to cover this whole part with green because I can paint over it later. Ooh, it's funny how long you work to make something look like it was done very quickly. This is like an hour of painting. All right, next piece. If you look in this very blurry picture, there are some gears in there, but that's the best picture I have. So I needed some little gears, and I found these. I found them on Amazon. They are decorative gears. They are not functional. In fact, they are made from a very soft, low melt metal. I hit one of these with a torch and the whole thing completely melted. But I want to install them in there. They're not going to rotate or anything. I think I just want to chew away a little bit, set it in there, and then glue it. I can't solder these. Again, they'll melt. Okay, I have to remove a little more material. Boy, these gears look enormous now. This is really super close. I can start just sanding it by hand to get it to fit. There we go, that fits nicely. I'm gonna go and make 2 more of these. Got my 3 gears prepped here and shaped, and then we're gonna epoxy those in. I think that looks pretty good. Just the tiniest amount of glue. 3rd gear going in. One more little detail, the butt has some sort of wire wrapped around it, and I have this thin brass rod that I'm going to use. To wrap it though, I actually have one of our failed 3D prints here for the butt, and I'm going to drill a hole in it so that I can put the wire in there. Like so, and then I can wrap this around our failed print, and it should fit on the finished print really well. And there we go. We got a nicely swirled piece of brass. This worked better in my head. That kind of worked. Okay, this should fit in there now. Yes. The other end can go in there. We'll just glue those. Hint of super glue.
That looks so good.
That's cool. Just taking my butterfly for a walk. Actually sanding the bottoms of the feet flat so that it works better on here. Yay!
Nice.
And then finally, I'm not really going to weather this so much as just scuff it up a tiny bit. The paint is fresh, so I have a Scotch-Brite pad. I can come in and just sort of buff everything and get a little bit of paint to chip off. I'm just going to go over all of the spots here. Do the last bit of cleanup anywhere that's got like smudges and stuff. The very last thing I want to do is just a little bit of polishing, not on the whole thing, but like on the high spots, just so that there's a little bit of contrast, a little bit of shine here and there. Oh yeah, just a little shiny there. I like it. I could probably spend the next hour polishing this thing and making it look really pretty, but I'm ready to call it done. And let me tell you, this has been an education. I tackled a lot of new skills in this project. It took me a while, but I'm very proud of how it turned out. And very happy with the new skills. Look at this go. I did CNC, I did silver soldering, I did acid etching, a little bit of everything. And I love it. I can't believe how cool it is. This was exactly what I had in my head when I started. And we pulled it off. Thank you so much for hanging out with us during this build. It's been an absolute pleasure doing it. Thanks especially to the members of our Extra Credit Club. They keep the lights on around here, and we thank them for their support. You guys are amazing. Please keep it up, and that'll do it. I really hope you enjoyed this. We tackled a bunch of new skills. Maybe you learned something. But most importantly, just thanks for hanging out with us in the shop. We'll see you next build. Got this tiny little saw here, and I should be able to just cut right through those.
Yes, cut right into your thumb.
This saw sucks.
Let's go use something else.
Let's use a better saw. I love my robots. I hope they will spare me in the coming apocalypse. You hear that, machines? I love you. This is all I want to do. I just want to make very small things out of brass. That's gross. Look at me. Look at me, I'm smoking.
It's so cold out here.
Uh-oh. Nope, nope, get over here. Oh, jeez. Now I'm gonna carefully, just let me, it's so fiddly. Stay on there. Come on. No! That's so
much.
So much. Ah! No. Probably should have. Ah! Hot glue! It's coming out everywhere. In the hole. Go in the hole, please. Near the hole. All right, good enough. There we go. Nope. Damn. It's so tiny. Oops. Come on.
Ooh.
Yeah. Boy, that gets a lot bigger when you undo it.